Hello. Today, we're going to talk about different methods to deploy web applications to Microsoft Azure. Let's start with the first method, deploying an app from GitHub to Azure. Azure App Service supports continuous deployment from GitHub, Bitbucket, and Azure repos. You just link your Azure App Service to your GitHub repository, and then any updates to the repository will automatically deploy and run on Azure App Service. The process involves creating a web app in the Azure portal, setting up the source control from GitHub to your web app, and setting up continuous deployment from GitHub. Azure will pull the latest code from the specific branch you set. The second method is deploying an app from your local system to Azure. You can publish directly from your local development environment, such as Visual Studio, VS Code, or any other IDE, to Azure. You'll need to install the Azure SDK and tools for your preferred language and IDE. For Visual Studio, you can use the Publish feature, which will let you create a new app service and deploy your app in one process. The third method is deploying an app from Azure repos to Azure. Azure Repos is Microsoft's cloud-hosted private Git repos. You can use it just like GitHub to manage your code. The process of setting up CI/CD with Azure Repos and Azure App Service is almost identical to the process with GitHub. You can automate your builds and deployments with Azure Pipelines, which is part of Azure DevOps. Next, let's talk about Azure App Services. Azure App Service is a platform as a service, PaaS, for hosting web applications, REST APIs, and mobile backends. You can develop in your favorite language, be it .NET, .NET Core, Java, Ruby, Node.js, PHP, or Python. The last method we'll discuss is GitHub Actions. GitHub Actions help you automate your software development workflows in the same place you store code and collaborate on pull requests and issues. You can write individual tasks, called actions, and combine them to create a custom workflow. Workflows are custom automated processes that you can set up in your repository to build, test, package, release, or deploy any code project on GitHub. You can create CI/CD workflows using GitHub Actions and deploy to Azure. The fifth method involves Azure Functions. Azure Functions is a serverless compute service that lets you run event-triggered code without having to explicitly provision or manage infrastructure. You can create a function app in Azure, then deploy your code through Azure DevOps, GitHub, Bitbucket, or from your local system.